That is really good water. And I don't know if you do this, but in this industry that you welcomed me to 11 years ago, I have learned how much it takes to deliver that every minute of every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, year round. And everywhere I go, and I travel a lot these days, I always take a moment. This is a true story. In the hotel room or somewhere, I just sit quietly for a second, holding the water and try to think in my mind and thank in my mind, maybe offer a little prayer to the people who do that, which I know is you. It's a remarkable miracle and never to be forgotten. But I got the call on the bat phone. All of us in the water industry have a bat phone. I had this phone when I was at DC Water, and it was a Saturday morning in Washington, D.C., and we had a water main break at 21st in New Hampshire. Most of you probably don't know what that means in Washington, D.C., but 21st in New Hampshire is over on the side of the city near the World Bank. And there was a conference going on that weekend, and this was a Saturday, but over that weekend and the following week on international development questions. We had several major hotels that were out of water because of the water main break. We had water streaming into the street, all sorts of apartment buildings and residences, so all sorts of problems that we all know happens when a water main break hits. And I got the call. I'd just been on the job for less than 3 months. I didn't really know what happens, what we do as a water utility. So I'd ask them, call me so I can go and see what we do. I want to find out what happens. Well, I said, Mr. Hawkins, we got a big water main break. It's a real problem, but we're not going to be able to come and get you. Can you get up to Bryant Street? I was like, sure. It's not far from where I live in the center of the city. That's where we rolled our drinking water trucks. Our big pump stations in Howard University is Bryant Street, beautiful building like they used to build 100 years ago. And I got to my English basement apartment. Any of you do you know what an English basement apartment is? I didn't either when I answered the ad. I was wondering, they're going to serve me tea when I arrived or something. An English basement apartment is an apartment that is not fully submerged in the ground. It has a window to the outside, which is actually a very useful little addition because I always knew what I was going to wear by just looking out the window before I left. Raining, snow, whatever's going on, I can see before I walk out of my basement apartment. And I became very conscious of footwear. So I see everybody walking by. But I looked out my window, and on that morning, it was sheet white. That had never happened before. I got my uniform on at DC Water. I wore a standard issue uniform every day. So I got on my uniform. I got my safety stuff that they had given me to go to a water main break. And I tried to open the front door, and I had to push open the door because this Saturday was the Saturday of snowpocalypse, Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. stops as a city if a half-inch of snow falls. Those of you from snowy climates, I grew up on the east side of Cleveland. That's the snow belt. We sort of laugh at Washington, D.C. And 3.5 feet of snow had fallen that evening before. So that's a big amount of snow for any place in the world, let alone Washington, D.C. So the whole city had ground to a halt. I had to push my door open because the snow had come down the stairwell, got out to the street, 9th Street, walking up to Bryant. The city was completely deserted. Nothing was plowed. Nobody was out. It was like a movie set where everybody had died of some horrible disease and you had one remaining person left. That's how I felt because I was walking up the street and there was nothing. Nobody, no vehicles, anywhere. And I walked up to Bryant Street. We get in there. Oh my gosh, how are we going to get to 21st Street across town? I'm at 9th. We got to get all the way across and then down to New Hampshire. Well, we put together a flotilla of trucks because DC Water has 673 trucks in its fleet. So we had plows. We had a plow. So we plowed our way across town to get to the water main break. I'm sitting in the crew cab with the general foreman. Get to the water main break, and I didn't know this. It's staggering what I did not know about our industry when I started on the job. But of course, what I've learned about water is that almost everything that I have learned makes sense to me. It is very much a field where, yes, there's incredible knowledge, there's all sorts of things every day, something new to learn. But when you learn it, for the most part, it's like, oh, that makes sense. If you pressure here, that happens here. If you push that, it's all very related. Well, they told me, well, there's water coming up everywhere. I couldn't get the image out of my mind driving up to that water main break. Any of you been there to Blizzard Beach at Disney World? The water park? Because when a water line is broken under the street, so a hard surface like this, and the water's underneath pouring out of the pipe, it often will kick up the street or crack the street itself because that water is creating such pressure as it pushes its way to the surface. And then it breaks through anywhere where that hard surface has been cracked or there's already a break. So if there's a street sign that goes through the concrete, now you got a little hole that breaks through, water will come up out of that little hole. So we had all these old cracks on the street. It hadn't been paved in a while. And then there was a big crack where the water main break was. And then anywhere else where there was a street sign or something, water was coming up all over the place. And I realized as I sat in the general foreman's truck, well, what do you do now? And I had to display my level of ignorance to the general foreman, which may not have been a great idea since I was the chief executive. And he goes, well, you have to turn the water off. Like, see, that's logic. That makes total sense to me. You can't fix a pipe if water is pouring out of it. Of course, I'd never thought about that before. Note to self, everything I was realizing as I was watching is the same thing everybody else probably never thought about until they see the water pouring out of the street. Of course you have to turn the water off. And I'm like, well, how do you do that? Back at the plant? And they're like, of course not. He didn't say it, but I know he thought it. You have to turn it off with a valve. I'm like, valves? Well, of course, that makes perfect sense. How many of those do we have in the city? A few hundred? I don't know. He says 47,000 valves. I was like, what? I said, well, how do you know where the valves are? Reaches down to the floor around my feet. I was like, you're looking at my feet? No, it was a big book. Boom, takes it out, clunks it on the front seat. And he opens it up, and it was an old book. Should have been it would have had blood stains on it, and coffee stains, and ripped pages, and yellow stickies, and handwritten notes, and faded. It looked like to me, I don't know, printed when Eisenhower was president. I don't know. But each page had a few streets on it. And on it would be the indication of where valves were and storm drains and the age of pipes. And according to this book that was printed, God knows when. I heard Doug use this phrase this morning, that's about as smart as a white crayon. I love that phrase. Because the idea of drawing with a white crayon, of course, you see nothing. I was like, and he kept, so here's what I said, what do you do with that? He goes, well, he goes to the right page. Here's 21st, New Hampshire. Here's where the valves are. And team members from DC WASA at the time would come up. There was an old truck, so he'd roll down the window, and he'd look at the book, and he'd send the teams off with a shovel, because they had to shovel the snow, to get to the valve cap, open the valve. I did not know this. They put this T-bar in, standing across from each other, and they start turning the valve to close the valve, to shut the water off of the system. And what started happening is the valve started breaking. I'm like, well, why are the valves breaking? He says, well, we haven't touched these valves in who knows how long. So we're asking the valve to work when it hasn't been used in maybe decades. And we're asking it to work when water is pouring through the pipe. So we're asking it to shut those, that's put the valve under pressure, they break. So what do you do then? Well, you go out to the next valve and close that one. And every time you go farther from where the water main break is, and you close that valve, you're potentially shutting more customers out of water while you fix the pipe. And the reason this was like drawing with a white crayon on white paper is because the book was so out of date. We couldn't get all these valves. We were turning to all this work. By the way, people were sitting in the reception areas of the hotels in foreign garb, looking out the window and like, what country are we in? Because nothing seemed to work. Finally, we called back to the main office and had Kurt, can't remember his last name, but Kurt was there. He'd been a long-time employee. He said, well, of course, that book is so far out of date. That's why it's the white crayon book. It's not going to tell you in Washington, D.C., which has been on a development boom for 20 years, like this city, what is there with that old book. And in fact, you have to go up the street, take a left, 21st, and there's a brand new, huge building. They put on a whole new set of infrastructure. There's 3 valves. You've got to turn. It's not on the book. That's how you're going to get the water off. So finally, we went up, did that, got the water off. Then I was like, well, then what happens? Well, we think the book is right about there's more than one water main on this street because of a variety of reasons. We think it's this one. So we're going to have to dig down. Well, first we have to mark all the other utilities, as you all know. Then after that, we dig down, we see what the pipe is, and then, oh my gosh, now we know what inventory we need to fix it. So we got to call back to Bryan Street, see if it's in our warehouse. If it's not in our warehouse, we're going to have to send it out over the Warren network. Maybe one of the other water utilities in the area will have the right piece. Then we'll see if we can get it. Then we'll have to plow our way back to get the piece to, I'm like, oh my God, what have I done? If you had designed a system to be inefficient, this is not the people's problem. This was the tools that they had at their disposal. Were shocking to me. Then I asked the guy in the truck with all these people staring at us, like, well, who talks to them? And he looked back at me and says, well, you've got to do something around here, so how about you? Well, I said, well, what should I tell him? And he said, well, we're working on it. We'll know better once we get the valves off, mark the get down, dig, because he couldn't give any estimate based on the information we had. Now, why do I tell that story to this conference? Because my message to you is this is the right conference at the right time in the right place on the right issue. I said that this morning at a breakfast. You all are the vanguard, based on what you do, of an essential change that is coming to our industry and enables us to do things that were but dreams a decade ago. And that's extraordinary. But I think it's hard to have a sense of the incredible opportunity unless we're pretty mindful of the challenges that we face. And I call it the ugly fist, because I was sitting in that truck thinking, what have I done? Why did I take this job? Because I'd never worked for a water utility before. I'd only ever regulated them, sued them, and agitated about them. And I was part of one. In fact, I had sued that utility. I had regulated DC Wasa. They didn't like me. I didn't like them. No, that's not true. I didn't really know them. It's just every time I met with them, it was dark suits, very tough. So I'm a lawyer. I know how to do that. I'd rather interact. No, that wasn't the way the utility functioned. So walking into a new place, having never worked there, not an engineer, not a scientist, don't even know where valves are, all that stuff, that's a hard road to climb to gain credibility with a team that's been doing this work for decades. And I'd regulated that place, and I'd kicked them quite a few times in that process. And now I was learning, oh my God, we put our teams on the field with these old books that are like white crayons and can't do anything. And the team was frustrated because they look like they don't know what they're doing in front of all these people, but that's the best they can do given the tools they've been given. And the week after, this was a miserable 10 days for me, I had a meeting with our CFO. He came in, I got the budget. Mr. Hawkins, capital budget. DC Wasa, see this chart? It was like a rocket ship. It's about $225 million a year this year. It's going to go up about $100 million a year every year for 4 or 5 straight years. Peak out at over $600 million a year, and then it's going to stay up there. And I'm like, couldn't you have shared this with me before I applied? How on earth are we going to raise? Imagine, you have to raise $100 million each year more than you've raised last year. And that's when I really realized, and it's hard for me to be in despair for very long, but I was. I was panicked and in despair because of this fist. I'm going to quickly describe the fist because I think it is a fist that one shape or another, all of us face Even if we're not in a water utility, if we're serving a water utility, if you're a government agency, this FIST is something you've heard of. And if we don't know how to overcome this FIST, the skills and capabilities that you have and that are on display at this conference are going to have a hard time gaining as much forward opportunity as I think can be. Here's the FIST. First, it's water. I'm going to say something that sounds odd to be on the ugly FIST, but it is, because it's a stark reality that water, some of you have heard me say this. People had asked me at DC Water, how many jobs do you support? DC Water. I want to know our staff, our contractors, all told 5,000, 6,000 people, I would imagine. It's like, oh, no. You ask me how many jobs we support? The answer is all of them. If this building didn't have water, sewer, and fire suppression, they'd have to evacuate it after a while, because you can't be in a building. You can't get a certificate of occupancy unless you have what we deliver. That's every single job. I've been trying to struggle in my mind. What job is possible without the services we deliver? I can't think of any. We support every single job. And when our stuff isn't there, those jobs are at immediate risk. And how many lives do you support? Usually wasn't asked that way. How many people, like on our service area? And I was like, oh, all of them. When NASA looks for life in the universe, what they look for first is water. It's the only essential element to every single life form. Our industry is the only set of jobs in all of creation that is essential to every job and every life form. No one else can say it except for maybe power, and the only reason power can say it is because they power us. That's amazing. So why is it on the FIST? So this essential thing that's unbelievable, most important public health, is because the two. When in 2009, when I joined DC WASA as the general manager, the American Society of Civil Engineers doesn't do it every 4 or 5 years. They do their State of the Infrastructure report. It was that year. As if they really wanted to make sure I recognized the challenge I had taken, because water and wastewater, with essential service, every job was D and D minus. How can that be that this essential service is at a D or D minus? That's nuts. And by the way, I teach a class at Princeton. I once had a student that really deserved an F, so I gave it to him. You know what happened? I had to do extra paperwork. I'm like, some student got an F and I do extra paperwork? That is not right. Message, give a D, no paperwork. But D's deliver pretty much every bit. It's just 1 point instead of 0 on the grade average. But anyways, I went to American Society of Civil Engineers. They never actually give an F. Because if you give an F, you can't get worse. You can't threaten somebody. But anyways, D or D minus on the service in Washington, D.C., the median age of a water main. And you all technical people, I think that means half are older and half are newer, is 80 years. Median age. At a water main break, MacArthur Boulevard, big transmission main, because De La Carlia, the reservoir and treatment facilities right up the street. I was in Boston delivering a presentation not unlike this one. I got the call on the bat phone, water main break, MacArthur, flooded a school, kicked up the street because the pipe was so big, went right to Logan, flew back, went to site, targeted everyone, looked down at the pipe when they did the excavation. This was a big transmission line. Stamped on the side of it was M-E-I-G-S, MIGS. But you will see that name if you visit the U.S. Capitol and you look underneath on the iron under the stairs or on the railings, because Miggs put his name on all the things he built. He was Captain Miggs when he put that water main in, and became General Miggs as the Quartermaster General for Abraham Lincoln in the Civil War. That's the transmission main. By the way, I didn't know this either. When you put the new piece in, you have to have a coupling on either end to couple it to the old, and the coupling has to be able to match up an 1856 pipe with a new one, and that takes a special kind of coupling. They tell me we had one. So he sent out on the Warden Network. Where else has one? Guess what? Boston! Guy was sitting in the crowd when I was talking. Called up, said, hey, I just saw you this morning, and yes, I've got an 18 pipe that can coupling. I was like, how about that? But what is that? We have these systems that are incredibly old. 450 water main breaks a year in Washington, D.C., spewing all that drinking water out into the ground. Here we are doing all this work to conserve it, and one water main break will take all that conservation, put it to naught as it's pouring out into nothingness. It's crazy. So it's terrible condition on this essential service. Third, most of the people in Washington, D.C., and in most places we are, I'm not talking about here, actually water here has been so essential and been so critical. I think far more people are aware, and in part because of much of the work that many of you in this room do. But on the East Coast, where it's more of a flooding problem than a water scarcity problem, at least mid-Atlantic to the north, most people have no idea when they turn on the tap in the morning where it comes from, or what it takes to deliver it, or when it goes down the drain, where it goes and what it takes to clean it. It's like magic to them. And by the way, in our industry, we don't always sell everyone because it's sort of like a badge of courage or a badge of, we're so good at what we do. This modern miracle, no more important public health advance, penicillin, nothing compares to the delivery of clean water and then the cleaning of it after we use it. Cities could not function with all these people congregated in relatively small places without what we do. And yet we're so good at it, most people don't know. And some of that's like, that's cool, we're so good, people don't have any idea. On the other hand, if people don't know what we do, why would they pay for it? And in D.C., most people would have no idea who delivered their water or who took it back. Or if they did know us, they didn't like us and didn't trust us. Because the worst lead contamination problem in the United States of America prior to Flint was Washington, D.C. And in the old-fashioned way of not communicating, keeping your head down, we're good at what we do. If we're in the paper, it's bad, so better to be out. D.C. WASA was not very good at communicating what had happened on the lead problem, and people thought they'd hidden information and poisoned their children. So I was dealing with essential service, terrible condition. People don't know us at all, or if they do, they don't trust us. And by the way, there's all these surveys. Well, people ask whether we should pay more for water, and the answer is no. Like oh no, how horrible that is. Of course that's the answer. If you got a call, would you like to pay more for a hamburger? What's your answer? No. Shoes? No. Conferences? No. Why would you say yes? I want to meet the person who says yes to that question. Unless we know why we are paying more. We have a value proposition we understand that matters to me that I'm willing to invest in. Which means I have to know who's asking me that question, why it matters to me, what they're doing with my money, all this information going back and forth that doesn't happen if I don't even know who my water provider is. Or to the extent I do, they poisoned us with lead and didn't tell us. And there's no people involved. It's like this institution that's off in the middle of nowhere. Who the hell is D.C. WASA? No one knew who that was. So people didn't know us. I'll give you one other example. I wore a standard issue uniform. My coat looked like this. My name was on my shirt, in case I forgot. I always loved that little. And then my title, in case I forgot, that was also on my shirt. My the logo and on the badge on my arm. And I was walking home from a water main break that next spring, and someone tapped me on the shoulder. I've always wanted to work for you. Seeing my uniform, and I was walking. I was like, oh, really? What are you interested in doing? True story, and it led to a big change. He stared at me and he said, I've always wanted to work for the Department of Corrections. I'm like, what? I'm not often speechless, but I was speechless, and I looked at our logo, DC Water and Sewer Authority, hieroglyphics, a little patch that big, can't read any of it. The tagline was 2 sentences, and all 2 sentences, can't read any of it. It had red, white, and blue, like all patches in D.C. It had the Capitol Dome, like all patches in D.C. And it had hand over water. I'm convinced that looks like 2 hands in a handcuff. Not sure. But the bottom line and the message I got is that this person, I'm wearing a uniform, I got patches and stuff all over me, and they have no idea who I work for. They can't tell by looking at me that I'm a water person. Our 650 trucks in the fleet, people think we're the Department of Corrections, for God's sake. We're in their neighborhood with prisoners on release, which may be a good thing, but that's just a different thing. How are people going to write a check to us with this $100 million increase every year if they don't know who we are and they don't have an idea what we're doing for them? Why would someone do that? Fourth, finances. We had nowhere near the financial capability to do the escalation. Rate increases, First year, they were telling me I needed a 19% rate increase. Second year, 12. We didn't have the cash money. What about going to credit mark? I mean, we didn't have the revenue necessary to do all this work, which does not include, by the way, that big capital expansion I mentioned is all regulatory mandated. Our replacement for drinking water, capital infrastructure, was 1/3 of 1% a year. Again, the mathematical people in the room tell me that's a 300-year replacement cycle on an 80-year median age system, which is why this was an ugly fist. I was like, that's disaster. And that increase in capital had no extra money for that. Because as we all know, as the regulations tighten, you always do the mandated work. And what gets scrimped on is that operational capital work that is actually what delivers the water to the customer. So you're doing all these things, not saying they're not useful, but we're going to reduce nutrients from 4 milligrams per liter to 3. Or we're going to do this or that, which is wonderful. I'm not going to do anything that changes the pipe that goes to your house. So you're going to see as many water main breaks, sewer backups as you did before. And I'm going to ask you for rate increases for that. That's a broken fifth. Our industry is considered conservative. I don't mean conservative politically. I mean conservative like we don't want to adopt lots of new things. As I've thought about that and learned about it, I actually think there's some truth to it for reasons that are completely rational. If you are running a water system, and D.C. WASA had this instance, the reason there was a lead in water crisis in Washington, D.C. is because the treatment system going out into distribution was changed to improve water quality. This was not like Flint, not trying to save money, not trying to do it. It was to reduce disinfectant byproducts. And the feeling at the time by the Centers for Disease Control and EPA is that if you go from chlorine to chloramine, you reduce disinfectant byproducts. That was a good thing. So we did it. What nobody knew is that by switching to chloramine, it changed the water chemistry. This is like Flint, reduced the scaling on the inside of the pipe, lead leached. We had a lead spike. Message, other than all the lead issues, is, oh my gosh, we better not try anything new unless we are darn sure it works. Because if you're wrong in our industry, this is not only the older people in the room will know what I'm talking about here. This is not a change from old Coke to new Coke. Remember that? One of the greatest fiascos in all marketing history was actually a conspiracy, because when they went back to classic Coke, demand went up from what it had been before. But Coke could change, and yeah, people didn't like it, but people's lives weren't at risk. They could spend the money to retool and do a whole new branding thing over classic Coke and come out better than when they started. DC Water tries something new, and oh my gosh, it doesn't work. We have a public health risk. We're going to get sued. We're in the paper. We're being attacked. People don't trust us. Okay, now we use chloramine. We got to switch the process back. We're going to retool again. What about the training that went into it? Did we try something new with inventory that we now can't use? So we got to go back to the old thing. All limited resources. You can't be wrong. There are a lot of rational reasons to go with what you know works, because we can't be wrong. Innovation, by its definition, means trying new things, some of which will work, some of which won't. We won't work with drinking water or wastewater going into the environment at stake. I do believe, however, that the absolute wrong conclusion has been drawn from that reality. I'll come back to that. So that's this fist. I don't mean to be depressing. That's why I was panicked when I joined our industry. The message I have is that despite the panic, that the years that followed I've enjoyed every stop in my career, were by far the best years of my whole career. It was a wonderful experience. Water people are great people. Despite the fact that I did not know about valves and all these things about the system, the people who worked at DC WASA, we became DC Water, welcomed me, taught me, brought me in, despite the fact I was a lawyer and a regulator of them. And it was amazing what we were able to do as a crew, as a team working together to transform. And it was people like you who were leading the transformation, because the water conservation world, by its definition, is the most customer-oriented element, except for maybe the customer lines and folks who are answering the calls, of a whole enterprise. You're the last stop between a utility and the communication to the customer, because that's where you're located. And all the creativity and innovations you're going in to deliver to a customer something that's to their benefit, as well as the utility, particularly in a water-scarce world. There's an incredible window into all the things that are possible when you build that relationship. And I know that there are revenue problems. We had it at DC Water, despite the fact DC was growing by 1,000 people a month, every single month for 10 straight years that I was there, on average. Our water consumption was going down. And when water consumption goes down and you make your money by water going by the meter, that's why the CFO is not so happy. Because your revenue is going down as you're conserving, even though everyone knows to do it. There's all sorts of strategies to handle that question. And I know you all know that in the West better than almost anywhere. But as that happens, your customer all of a sudden says, oh my gosh, the utility is helping me on my side of the bill. I always thought they just wanted to do whatever they could to get as much money from me as possible. Raising rates, I don't know why. I have a leak and they don't tell me, and then all of a sudden I get this higher bill. Now they're doing all these things to help me reduce my bill, water conserve, do all these smart things, infiltrate water. I now understand the water system and all these things. I'm part of it. It's not that distant bureaucratic organization, I don't know who it is. I am now engaged in the water cycle, and you all are the link between people who otherwise aren't in the water industry, but of course all of us depend on it, and the industry itself. You're that critical point, which is so cool. And here's why I think it's so possible. First, this is what I call the hand over the fist. First part of the hand is water. Water's way smarter than me. I'm amazed how wonderful water is to be in as a career. It's part of everything, every job, every life form. It connects to everybody. We're in everybody's home. We're in every business. We have so many direct relationships if we take advantage of them. I ran nonprofits. The big question when you run a nonprofit is, how do you build a relationship with someone who might want to donate to you? How do they know you? This is, if any of you are involved with nonprofits, the common comment in a nonprofit, we're the best kept secret. Because we do really good work, but not enough people know. In water, we are in their house. They take us inside their bodies, for God's sake. And it's every business, and we're connected. And yes, they get a bill from us, but that is a connection and a relationship that they must have, that we can use to our advantage. It's incredible what you can do with water, measure, use, a relationship. Second, on condition. Well, actually, I'll go to customers. We decided we've got to rebrand. This was not our first step. My message on rebranding, by the way, for what it's worth, do not rebrand first. Make sure enough things are happening at your utility that people have already seen that things are changing and that their relationship with the utility is changing, so that a rebrand doesn't seem like it's just a marketing ploy. Oh, it's the same old place. They just want to slap a nicer thing on it. So we didn't rebrand for 1.5 years. We did a lot of things that indicated we are doing things differently, with different relationships, and then the brand was representing things we had already done and could point to, rather than it seemed like just a window dressing. But branding can also be done cheaply. Didn't want to spend a lot of money on it. We did a contest in DC for our new brand, starting to get people to think about who we are and what we do, and we had 178 entries come in that included turds, toilets, fire hydrants. They were hilarious. But we then picked out a very simple DC with a water drop tilted to the side, with water is life as the phrase. Bright green, bright blue. That is now one of it's a well-known logo, in part because it's simple and easy. We picked environmental colors. Here's the other big change that happened to me, and then I hope through me to a lot of our customers. I'd been a lawyer, I regulated these places. I thought of our industry, mostly on the wastewater side, but even on the drinking water side, where you're pulling stuff out of the water and then discharging it, you're a discharger. You're a polluter. You need to pay for that pollution, so when I impose all these requirements on you, that's the way the system works. If my company makes this podium as a product, and there are pollutants as a side stream in the making of the podium, we impose costs on that company so that the price of the pollution is built into the price of the podium. It's taking an externality and internalizing it. That's how environmental laws work. That's why we go after the polluter. Well, I thought of DC WASA when I was a regulator as a polluter. Even the aqueduct, which was getting tailings and discharging into the Potomac, they're a polluter. And I was like, wait a minute. As I thought about it, the water comes off the Potomac, we treat it, we distribute it, comes back to us. We treat it, goes back to the Potomac. We're the largest and original recycling system in every place that we exist, which is everywhere. And second, we're not creating a product by which there's a pollutant as a byproduct. We're taking everybody else's pollution, and on their behalf, we're cleaning it for them. We're the most important environmental agency in Washington, D.C., and every environmental group's got an office in Washington, D.C. We're more important than all of them because we are doing more for the Chesapeake Bay, the largest freshwater estuary in North America, than anybody else as an environmental organization. And I remember when I went back to the team, because I met with everyone in small groups before I did anything. Always hear from your team, get language, sense issues so that the team knows you're doing things with them, not to them. But I'd heard, and this, I didn't hear it directly, but I had this sense in the room, we work for DC WASA, we don't get good press, but we know how important we are. It was like an internalized question to the people who work, and we know that a lot of people in the water industry stay. Because once you're in it, you know how it matters to yourself. But I came back, and it was a bigger room, all hands. I just want to say we're rebranding, and here's why. We're saying to the world that we're the most important environmentalists in this city. And you, Team DC Water, Team Blue as we called it, you're cleaning an essential. And what I visibly remember was the folks in the room sitting up straighter a little bit. Damn right. I've never heard anyone say it before, but that's damn right. It's amazing what kind of energy and enthusiasm that built in the team. So the branding wasn't just a brand. I want people to know our trucks are out there, that when they write a check, all those trucks are there. It's not the Department of Corrections. It's your money at work, doing work in your city, and you can see it. It's on your street. You'll see they're efficient, effective, friendly. They do their work well, and if they don't, tell us, and we'll get better at it. But you're not going to know that unless you know the brand. But the brand is also water is life. We're telling people what we do matters to you. Third, on finances. I had all these rate increases to do. In the old days, DC WASA days, there was 2 public hearings that were required by law. They were done at a government building down by Union Station that nobody knew where it was, including me. I always had to try to figure out how to find it. So very few people showed up, which was a victory. And we can have those 2 public meetings, checked off the box. We'll get the rate increase. The first time anyone will really know is when it hits them in the bill. They might be mad, but it's already done. We're getting the revenue. I'm like, no. That may work once or twice, but that is going to kill us. So we changed everything about how we communicated with our customers. So we did rate hearings in every ward of the city. I did 65 of them. And we invited everybody who contacted us for any reason in the prior several years, whatever we had records for, to the meeting. And guess what? People don't call us and say, hey, the water's great today. We know what people call us about, problems. So we were inviting anybody who had a problem with us to come talk to me, the CEO, and I don't stand up here, I stand down on the floor. I give a presentation with 2 parts, which I'll come back to, and then I answer your questions. And I don't walk away from you, I walk towards you when you're asked, no matter how mad you are. Yes, we make mistakes. I'm here, my whole team is here. Every major office at DC Water was in attendance. So if you had a question, personnel's right here, procurement's here, capital projects there, water quality's here. We're all here. We're here to answer we are not perfect, we're people. But if we haven't made a mistake, we'll fix it. And we started doing that in every ward of the city, and guess what? Over 8 years, we got every single rate increase we asked for, including, in total, almost tripling rates over 8 years. And people thought we weren't going to get any. That didn't happen by accident. So the presentation, 2 pieces. I won't go in great detail. A lot of this, by the way, is the kind of things you do. First presentation is, can I prove to the audience, if you are ratepayers, that the amount of money that you're spending with me now, so the checks you're currently writing, is going farther and serving you better than it was the year before? Can I prove it? Can I prove that we're more efficient? Can I prove that we have less water main breaks? Can I prove that we replace a fire hydrant faster? Can I prove that our treatment cost per 1,000 gallons is cheaper because we're using your money more efficiently? You should demand that of us. Can I prove that I'm working with you on reducing your water bill through a conservation strategy just like you deliver? That's for you. We're doing it and I can prove it. So then I get to the second part of the presentation, that if I ask you for more money, which I'm going to, it's not because the stereotype of a public agency, which I hate, by the way, but nonetheless a stereotype, you're just inefficient, you're going to get more bloated, blah, blah, blah. No. I just proved to you that we're more efficient than we used to be. And we're going to get more efficient next year by the kind of things you all know about. If I ask you for more money, it's because there's work that needs to be done. And I have to prove to you that it is worth it for you to invest in those projects. And by the way, every project in your ward are up on a board in the back of the room. Not here, by the way. This was in my imaginary. So you could go in every meeting into the back room and see in your neighborhood where we were doing work to benefit this place. And by the way, we were always making sure, one of our overlays was to make sure places saw the benefit. That was not the primary. It was always water quality, but let's just make sure every part of the city sees some benefit from our work. So we have this value proposition that's personal. And at the end of that, then I'll answer all your questions. We made a mistake. I'll answer them tonight, or we'll get back to you in 24 hours. And it changed with the new logo and our people seeing what we're doing. It was not hard to take DC WASA from one of the least liked agencies in Washington, D.C., and think on that one, to one of the best viewed agencies in the city. Same people. The last one I'll mention, this is squarely in your wheelhouse, is this notion that we're conservative. And again, not politically. That's because of all the reasons I just said. It's hard to change something with public health on the line and all the rest. But the conclusion that we're not creative is exactly wrong. Totally upside down. I'm astonished when I was watching those guys it was guys on that trip. We had lots of wonderful women who worked at DC Water. But watching the folks fixing me, I was like, are you kidding me? When you open up the street, you don't even know what you're going to find. And it's like repairing a car that's hidden from your view that will have pieces on it from a Tesla and a Model T. And you've got to fix it under time pressure with people watching every minute. If that is not a definition of creativity, I don't know what is. It's in the DNA of our industry. Everything you're using, new stuff, old stuff, on the fly, tight budgets, got to fix this, people are waiting. I'm getting calls from the council member or the mayor or the business district or residents and what's going to happen. And oh my gosh, we didn't expect that and we dug up, this is before that's creativity on the fly daily, every day. We have an incredibly creative industry within a construct that means we're very careful about what innovations we drive. So, my conclusion on all of that and why you are in the right place at the right time doing the right things is twofold. First, on water conservation. I know it has really been a paramount issue in the West. But it is coming to the forefront on the whole side, not only the use of the customer, but all of the water once it leaves the treatment plant to its final use. I always want to know, non-revenue water, how much of the total water, wherever it's leaking, I don't care where it is from here to the tap, where is that happening? Because no one has enough money no matter what the value proposition is. And when I think of how much we were spending at DC Water for water main breaks with all that water that we pumped out of Potomac, pumped electricity, treated all sorts of chemicals, electricity, pumped all over the city, all sorts of electricity, and then it leaks out into the ground, an old valve leaking out into the ground, that is cash money every minute of the day flowing out of your enterprise for all those costs. By the way, in a lot of places where that's leaking out or in the house of the person who's now going to pay for it and they're going to be mad at you because they're paying for something they don't know they're using because they didn't know they had a leak, all of this is bad. And a lot of that water, by the way, is I&I that gets in the sewer, which then goes to the treatment plant where you spend more money pumping it and treating it in this cycle of, oh my God, we cannot spend money that way in this world. And we don't need to. What you have in the room, the conference room here where you have all these incredible innovations on diagnosis, on water reduction, water conservation, measuring with a customer, knowing what we're here, how is it coming out here, how can we keep track, how can I watch it on my phone, all the things that you're doing is the manner in which we relate to a customer, we build a sense of trust with them, not to them or at them, with them, that is the foundation of everything else. And by the way, you can save your own utility a significant amount of money. If you save non-revenue, even techniques, if this is a water main, we were replacing the whole one. I actually tripled the rate of drinking water replacement to 0.3 to 1%. But we would replace the whole pipe. Well, we now know that there's new technologies that can roll through the pipe, does all sorts of things that I don't understand, to condition assessment the pipe on the inside, and you find, well, the whole pipe doesn't need to be replaced. That piece and that piece does. So we do a surgical incision on those pieces. The rest we clean in line. We save 80%. We reduce the use of the customer. They're happy with us because we're doing something for them. That's you all. So we can create the essential relationship with a customer by what you do. We can save the utility itself essential revenue. You reduce non-revenue water by 5%, that's getting a huge rate increase without a rate increase because it's money already in your budget. And you can demonstrate to the utility about what's possible, what the moonshot is. That's what you all have, and it's a gift. So I probably have, I'm not sure where I am. Am I over time? Probably. Sorry. I just wanted to conclude to say, I don't think there's ever been a moment in the water industry, as I've learned about it, read about it, and become part of what we do now, where as much as possible as it is today. You went to a water treatment plant 10 years ago and the prior 50, they pretty much looked the same. Now everything's changing rapidly. The new science and technologies and sensors and digital twins and artificial intelligence combined with relationship with the customer and interactions in ways, it's transforming around us, and you are at the vanguard. That is so cool. It's such a gift. And I know sometimes it's hard going. Sometimes it's a challenge. I'm doing water conservation, which reduces the rate. But what you're doing is the essential link. What's the future of our sector in every respect? So today at DC Water, everything's different about a water main break. Everything's digitized. All that's up to date. No more book on the floor where it's like coloring with a white crayon. They computerize, they send it back by microwave to the home office. Inventory is usually on the truck before we ever even leave, so we don't have to go back and forth. We hope we have caught it before it breaks by using one of the diagnostic tools. There's 10,000 ways we interact with the customer so they know what's happening and when the fix is going to happen. These are all changes, by the way, none of which came from me. They all came from you all. And the question only was how to identify them, how to gain the wisdom of the people in a room like this and enable a water utility to build this entirely new relationship with the people and communities they serve, become an essential community element, and drive financial numbers that can be remarkable. So, as you go forth, I'm so delighted to have been invited here. I've always wanted to come to this conference. I'm really astonished at what you've done. And I'm really grateful to have been with you this morning. I know you've got a great conference ahead. I looked at the program, all-star cast of what doing. I am talking tomorrow about persuasion. I believe persuading an audience is something that is like shooting a basket. You can learn fundamentals and do it well. So if you have a chance to come in, I've never had training in almost anything. Everything I've learned by doing. So I don't claim any corner on wisdom. I'll just tell you what's worked in my neck of the woods. And so I hope if you're interested in that, that'll be tomorrow, but you have a fantastic lineup. This is the right place to be at the right time. You are the right people, and you're doing great work at the side of angels. Thanks so very much.